Welcome back to the channel. This is the action figure grader over at Hakes Auctions. They had a pretty nice session that ended yesterday, Wednesday the 24th, for the Star Wars figures. There's still some really incredible G.I. Joes that are at auction as of the making of this video. I think they end tonight. But if you guys want to see a video kind of covering some of those G.I. Joe items, let me know that in the comments while you're leaving me a like. And I'll put together a video. I know a few of you collect G.I. Joes as well. There's some incredible stuff in that auction. Mint on cards, vehicles, pre-production, chromolins. It's a pretty awesome lot. So if you want to see a video about it, then I'll make one. If you don't, then I won't. But let me know in the comments. I also do have a new Patreon supporter that I need to say thank you to. Robin Trains. Thank you very much for becoming a Patreon member. It really does mean a lot that you guys help support the channel. All right, so there was a pretty decent auction. It was a pretty collector-friendly auction. Some nice high-grade stuff, but most of it was ungraded mint on cards that all sold in that $75 to $200 range. So I'm not going to go through each of those specifically, but I just picked out some items that I thought were worth talking about. Quite honestly, the most interesting were the loose graded glass leet Brazilian figures that ended at auction. So we'll go through those towards the end of the video. But let's just take a quick look at some of the items. Again, not everything, but just some interesting items that I thought were worth talking about. The first is a 12-back A Stormtrooper. This is not the SKU on the footer stand, as you saw in my what to buy video that's going to air the day before this one. There is a 12-back A Stormtrooper SKU on the footer stand on eBay that is being sold by a friend of mine in the collecting community. So go check that one out. Go check out that video from yesterday if you want to bid on that. But this is a 12A Stormtrooper. So this is kind of the second iteration card after the SKU on the footer stand. This was an AFA 80 with a 75 subscore for the blister. 1661 feels like a pretty good deal to me. And that's kind of a recurring thing that we've always talked about, is that if you can find one, if you can find a card with an overall 80 or higher, usually an 80 is about as best you'll get. But when you have a 75 subscore, that does tend to keep the price down a lot. And you can see why it got the 75 subscore when looking at the blister. It had some rippling on the upper right-hand corner of the blister. So that kept the price down a little bit. 12-back A, you know, if I'm trying to put together a 12-back A run and you are okay with a 75 subscore, this is about as cheap as you're going to find for a Stormtrooper on the 12A card back. We had another 12A Han Solo small head that sold, again, 75 subscore. So that, you know, actually this price went a little higher than I expected. At AFA 80, it sold for $27.25. All of the prices, by the way, include the 18% buyer's premium from Hakes. But, you know, we've seen a number of 12As that have sold here recently on eBay that I've covered in different market updates that have been in that 2,500 range. So this one actually went a little higher than I was expecting at $27.25. We had a 12B Palatoy Sand People. Now, this one had some scuffing to the case, and it also had a faded card back. So you don't see that happen very often, but I'm guessing that it was maybe either stored improperly or it was stored in an area where it was getting some sunlight on the card. And so that faded the card back. You do see that sometimes with Greedos too. So I don't know if it's like a specific thing to certain cards or if it's just a natural byproduct of being in front of some sunlight. So that kept the price way down, obviously, at $9.73. It was an AFA 85 as well, so it's a shame that it had some sun fading, but that's what it sold for. Next up was another Palatoy. This was a beauty. This was a 12-back Darth Vader Palatoy, punched example, clear blister, AFA 80. That one sold for $19.47, which is about right, because I think we've seen recently an AFA 85 Palatoy that sold on eBay for around $2,500, thereabouts. So I think for an AFA 80, you're getting about a, let's call it a 20% discount versus the AFA 85. It's also a punched example. The other one that I mentioned was an unpunched example. So pretty appropriately final sales price, if you ask me. If I had a guess when this auction was going, I would have said about $2,000. So that's kind of in that ballpark. Next up, I thought this was a good deal for a 20-back A. And again, it did have some staining to the cape, which is you got to look out for. So that kept the price down. It sold for $489, 20 back A Sand People AFA 80. But again, it had an 85 for the figure score, but it had that staining start to form. Could it get worse? Yes. Could it stay the same? Yes. But, you know, it probably went for about, I'd say about 60 to 70% less than what you would have expected for a 20 back A, and it's because of that staining to the cape, unfortunately. This was another pretty good deal. This was a 20 back G Death Star droid AFA 80. Again, 75 for the subscore, which probably kept the price down. 584 though, that's a pretty good deal. It was punched with the price sticker. So punched, price sticker, 75 subscore. You know it's going to go a lot less than what a typical AFA 80 would sell for. Archival case, but a great deal, I think, for someone who's willing to live with those kind of, not defects, but characteristics that would make it sell for less than it normally would. And I think that's a great buy for a collector-friendly item. Here was a CAS 75 mail-away promotion for the Boba Fett, and this was complete with the box, the paperwork, the note to consumers. It had the appropriate SWD baggie in there. The box got a 75, so it got the overall 75 with 285 subscores for the baggie and the figure. And it sold for $14.16, kind of right down the middle of the value code there for that Hakes gave it between $1,000 and $2,000. Now, if this had been an 85 grade, whether it's CAS 85 or AFA 85, it would have been well over $2,000, well over to that. So I thought that was a great price, I think, for what that was. Next up, you know, I don't know what's going on with 48 back A's, but we've seen a number of different 48 back A's sell for big time money all over the place. It's funny because I had a 48 back A Cloud Car Pilot, clear blister. It was high grade too. It was, I think, a CAS 80 plus, or it might have been an AFA 80. Can't remember, but I couldn't give it away. And I was like, man, this is really surprising because the offerless 48 back A's have proven to be very much in demand. And I'm guessing, I didn't look up the population report on this one. They didn't show it in the actual auction for this, but I'm guessing that this one is a pretty low population report, given that it was only a 70 grade from AFA, but it still sold for $586. Again, I couldn't give mine away. My Cloud Car Pilot 48 back A, I couldn't give it away, but I think it's been proven enough now for enough different characters that if you can get a 48 back A for any character in reasonable grade, it's going to be worth some money long term. And this is definitely proof of that. The other one that really is an expensive one typically is the Luke Hoth on the 48 back A offer list. That's one that to keep an eye out for. But I just wanted to point that one out, that it was only a 70 grade, but it still sold for $586. We had a Lily Letty made in Mexico for the U.S. market, Lando skiff. Not terribly hard to find this, but this one sold for AFA 80. It was an AFA 80 that sold for $266. Punched example. And we also had this one. I'm shocked this one went this high, but this is a 77 back A yellowed blister, AFA 85 admittedly, for Darth Vader. But it was a punched example, yellowed blister, and it still sold at above the value code of $400 to $700. It sold at $733. So further proof that Return of the Jedi's for Darth Vader in high grade, even with a yellowed blister, they're still going for big money these days. Next up was a Cy Snoodles band. This one was an AFA 80 and sold for $649. I thought that was a pretty fair deal for what that was, and pretty high grade. Some loose graded. We had a loose graded AFA 80 plus for Darth Vader, Lily Letty, 307 on that one. Man, it's just crazy how certain figures command big time money. This one had the kind of the translucent orange saber. It always known to have a thick tip saber, but I've never seen one so translucent in color before, so that was pretty cool to see. And the Vader, the Lily Letty Vader, is kind of known to have that kind of longer neck, elongated neck, pencil neck, if you will. So that one sold again for $307 for an 80 plus. That's a pretty big number there. There was a number of different ungraded transition 48 back free 9-num offers. This one was the R5D4. It had some scattered kind of wear to it, and then some issues at the bottom of the blister there, but that one still sold for $397. We had some Power of the Force too that sold, AFA 75 for Luke Battle Poncho. That one sold for $471. The Lando Calrissian was a 75 plus unpunched example with no price sticker. That one sold for $337. I thought that was a pretty good deal if you can live with that grade. Ungraded, just loose complete figures can go for $250 or more. So I thought that was a pretty good deal there. And we had a 75 plus grade R2-D2 pop-up lightsaber. The coin was encased with it. That was graded 85 plus. That sold for $973. That's a big healthy number there for a 75 plus grade, but it does present better than that. It presents very nicely, I think, for a 75 plus. That's a pretty harsh grade, if you ask me, for the figure, and I think it's because of the yellowing to the sticker, obviously, but that presents really nicely for a 75 plus grade for the figure. So I thought that was a pretty fair deal, really. And then we had some Glass Elite Brazilian figures that sold. I had no idea where they was going to end up, because you don't see them loose graded very much that pop up. This one was the C-3PO. I guess it has a black eyes variation. They're kind of just dotted on there, hand painted, it looks like to me. This one was an AFA 80 and sold for $1,038. But given that a droid's typical US C-3PO can go, and an AFA 80 can go for, $500 to $600, I thought to get the Glass Elite Brazilian version for $1,000 was probably about right. Kez Iban, another Brazilian figure. This one was a 75 plus and sold for $389. The Kia Mall, look at that sales price. That's one you don't see very often. This is another Glass Elite Brazilian. It's only a 75 plus and it sold for $1437. The value code was $400 to $700, so it was double the high end of the value code estimate from Hakes. And again, I bet that this one is pretty low census count. This one had kind of, you can see that the defects to the paint there, but it's a very unique figure. And it also had a different blaster that was included versus the gray, I think it's a gray Bespin blaster that she typically is packed with on the US Kenner cards and the Kenner Canada cards. But this Glass Elite Brazilian version includes a factory specific Imperial blaster. So 75 plus, and it sold for $1437. Huge number there. Here was the other Glass Elite Brazilian C-3PO. This is the more standard kind of dull gold paint application. And that one was a 75 plus and sold for $649. And that one is a lot more common than the Droids one. But that one, that's probably about right, what I expected there. The 75 plus grade Chewbacca, he's packed with the Zuckuss rifle. Again, that's specific to the Glass Elite factory. It's not like any old it's not any old Zuckuss rifle that can go with it. So this one sold for $489. And then finally was a 75 grade Wicket W Warwick from the Ewoks cartoon line. Another big number on that one. The value code was $200 to $400, which seems way too low, given that a loose complete figure can go for $300, $400 easily. So $519, I think, is a pretty fair deal for what that is. So that is all I really had. Again, there was a lot more that sold, and I hope that a lot of you were able to pick up some nice items for your collection. Thank you again, as always, for watching, and I'll be back soon.